In this video, I want to show you enough about Photoshop so that you could create a totally awesome e-cover all by yourself from scratch. Now, we have talked about some of the basic things like how to, modify an existing layout when an action is created, how to modify the first layout. We've also talked about how to take existing graphics and bring them into the layout to make something, so you can produce whatever action you want based on those existing graphics. But now we're going to step things up a little bit, and I'm going to give you some actual design pointers that you can use when you're creating your graphic. And I'm going to show you the tools that you're primarily going to be dealing with in Photoshop to do that. Now what we're going to do is actually combine two different actions, two different Black-Pack actions into one image. So we can take, one action, maybe there's a box that we like, and we can take another action. Maybe there is a CD that we like and we want to put those together. I'm going to show you how to do just that. So this video is going to be cram-packed with some very high-end information. First off, let's start with the box that we're going to use. So in this case, I think I want to use box 4. It's kind of a big box. We'll run the action for step 1. Okay, looks great. Now, again, you can go in here and you can customize everything that's there. You can make changes to it, or you can completely start from scratch. It doesn't matter. In this particular case, I'm going to start from scratch. So just to wipe the slate clean, basically, let's take this gradient up to the top so that it covers up all the other stuff, and we can actually shift click on all of these, drag them down to the trash and get rid of them. Now what I want to do, I think I'm going to redo this gradient actually, but a good idea to start with is maybe you could go out and find an image that you think represents the product, find a graphic that you're going to use. And the reason that I say this is a good idea is because sometimes when we find a particular image we're going to use, there's a color scheme to that image, and we might want to go with that color scheme. And that's the case in this particular project. I went over to iStockPhoto, iStockPhoto.com. There's going to be a link to that on the resources page, so you don't have to worry about memorizing the URL. But you can see there's a real prominent red theme here, and I kind of like that, so I'm going to stick with it. Let's go ahead and download the low-res version because we don't need anything really big for this project. We'll agree to the license. We're just going to get a standard license, and we'll download that, and I'll put it right on my desktop. Guitar Man. All right, we can close that, and let's go ahead and grab that. So we go to File, Place, Guitar Man, and we'll place that there. I'm going to go ahead and resize it. Even though it comes in small, you can get away with making it a little bit larger. Okay, we'll hit Enter, and that looks just fine. All right, so the next step in this case is let's colorize the background a little bit. So I'm going to go back to Layer 1. Let's grab a foreground color, and I'm going to use a color that is inside of my picture. So I'm going to sample that color. We'll get a background color, and I'm going to go with a darker one. A lot of times gradients look really nice for e-covers. You don't usually want to use solid covers everywhere. Okay, so let's go ahead, and I tell you what, in this case, I'm going to use my marquee selection to constrain this just to the front cover, and you'll see why in just a second. Here's my gradient. We're going from a light color to a dark. Okay, looks great. Now I want to move this selection over to the other half of the image, or the other third really, and I'm going to do Control-Shift-I, and that inverts the selection. So whatever I had selected, that is deselected, and whatever was not selected, now that is selected. The reason that I'm going to do that is because I want my gradient to go the other direction. And actually, yeah, let's take it the other way. Light to dark. There we go. Control-D to deselect that, and that looks pretty good. One thing that you'll want to do with images a lot of times is fade them in gradually. We don't want these sharp edges right now. And we're going to do that with a mask in this case. We'll select that layer. This is my Add Layer Mask icon. I'm going to click on that. That adds my mask, and I will go over here. Let's make sure we're using the default black to white. Black conceals, white reveals. So if I was to click and drag like this, you can see that it kind of fades things in there. Okay? And the way, I'll just mention this, when you're painting with a mask like this, with a gradient, every time you do make a selection like that, you'll notice that the thumbnail changes. So whenever you do this, you're doing a new mask. Okay, so you're not building on the existing one. So let me show you how you can get around that. Let's go ahead and do Alt Backspace to fill that whole thing in with white. Instead of using the gradient tool, I'm going to grab my paintbrush and a pretty large brush, larger than that. There we go. And we're going to have hardness set all the way to the left. That makes it a very soft brush. I'm going to hit the X key to switch to black. And I'm going to click right on the corner and then shift click on the other corner. Okay, you see what that does? It draws a straight line right across there. So again, click on the corner, shift click, click, and shift click. And you can actually just continue right around. Okay, now since we're dealing with a mask, it's non-destructive. So if we decide, well, we took out too much of it, it's okay. Just hit the X key, switch back to white, and you can paint it all back in. Okay, and in fact, you can get, if you want to get real creative and artistic, you can do the whole thing by hand. You know, just to give it kind of a raggedy edge, if you want. Okay, we're going to go ahead and go with that. And let's give it a little bit of depth. So we click FX, and again, this is off your screen, but we're going to select Drop Shadow. See what it looks like. You can click and drag over here to move your shadow around as well. Maybe right about there. Let's lower the opacity so that you can tell the difference between the picture and the shadow. Okay, looking pretty good. Next up, let's add some text. I'm going to change my foreground color to black. Grab the type tool, and we're just going to go with impact for the font. Play guitar. And I recommend that usually if you're going to have multiple lines for your headline, usually you do want to split that up. In just 17 days. The reason for that is it gives you a lot more flexibility with what you're going to do with your effects and things like that. Okay, and let's get that lowered down a little bit as well. Play guitar. In just 17 days. Let's move our mask. All right, there we go. Now we might want to draw a little bit more attention to this area right here. So let's create a new layer. Grab the marquee tool. Click and drag like so. And let's go ahead and hit the X key to switch to that dark red color. And I tell you what, we'll just do dark red to black. Grab the gradient tool and click and drag and see what that looks like. Whoops, we're set to standard black to white, so let's switch over to black to red. And the black is obviously way too black, and the red is kind of dark too. So let's go back in there, lighten the red up. And for the black, let's do an even lighter red. And try that. Maybe from this side. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I think we'll go ahead and go with that. Control D to deselect. But let me show you what makes this kind of thing really stand out. It's all about effects and filters. Let's go ahead and open up the effects. We'll throw a drop shadow on this. What I want to do is set the distance to 0. Right now you'll see the drop shadow on the bottom, and if I increase the size, you'll see a little bit more defined there. And there's not really any drop shadow on the top. I want it on the top and bottom, so I'm going to set my distance to 0, and then I'll increase my size. You can see that it comes top and bottom. Let's go ahead and add a stroke. We're going to make this a black stroke. And we also want to do an inner shadow, set that distance to 0. And that's just going to add a little bit more of a gradient inside there. Give it a little bit more realism. We might even throw in some satin. Satin is used primarily just to give a variation to whatever element you're applying it to. And we'll just play with that a little bit. Don't want to darken it up too much. As a matter of fact, I can go in there and change the color. We could lighten it up if we wanted to. And set it to normal. Again, what it's going to do is just give you a little bit of a variation. Let's play with contour a little bit. That one's kind of crazy, huh? Let's maybe see if we can find a happy medium here and lower the opacity. I'll tell you what, let's go with something maybe about like that. There we go. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Okay, and we'll go ahead and leave that as is for right now. I'm going to also go in and add, we'll click Filter, Render, Lens Flare. We'll throw in a lens flare maybe over there. Let's take a look at that. Now, I want to show you a little trick how you can deal with, in this particular case, we've got the stroke and inside shadow showing up on the left and right sides, and I don't really want that. I want it on the top and the bottom. So let me show you a trick around this. We're going to go ahead and do Control-T to transform this. I'm going to drag that past the area where I want it to show up and hit Enter. So now you can see a little bit more readily that I've got that stroke and inner shadow following along the left and right sides. What I'm going to do here is I want to render this layer out with all of the effects applied, and then I'm going to cut that portion off. Here's how you can do it. I'm going to hold the Control key down and click on the new layer icon right there, and then I'm going to go back up to that layer and I'm going to press Control E. What this does is merge this layer with the layer beneath it. Now the layer beneath it is empty, but the reason that we're doing this is because it will apply all of those effects and render them out like that. And watch, Control E, then I end up with just the graphic itself and I don't have to worry about the effects. So with my marquee tool, I can select that portion right there, hit delete and get rid of it. And now that banner looks exactly like I wanted it to. So our next step is I want to show you a little trick with smart objects inside of Photoshop. Let's select our play guitar layer and you can see which layer this is. I'm going to right click on it, go to Convert to Smart Object, and I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of our title in just 17 days. Convert that to a smart object. And the reason is with smart objects, we actually get a lot of flexibility. Like for example, let's go ahead and select play guitar. I'm going to do Control J to duplicate it. Now I have duplicated it, but I've duplicated a smart object. What that means, let's do Control T. I'm going to rotate that and I'm going to put it into position here. And I think we're going to do something, something about like that. And I'm going to do the same thing for the in just 17 days part. Control J to duplicate it, Control T to transform it. And I'm going to put that like right there. The reason that smart objects are so powerful is because watch this. If I go in to our original text layer, and I can actually do it to either one. I can do it to any one of those and it'll do the same thing. But if I double click on that, I get the text again. So I could, for example, select my effects here and let's do a gradient overlay. And we'll just find an overlay that we happen to like here. I tell you what, let's select one that we like, but then I'm going to go in and click on that and kind of make some modifications here. Let's change to a real dark blue. Not all the way to white. I'm just selecting different colors here. And you get a preview so you can kind of see what's going on. You click on the color stop first, and then you click on the color to actually go in and change that color. We want a real dark blue here. And we'll transition that. Let's go with that. And then we want to really lighten this up, but not go all the way to white. There we go. Okay, and I think I'm not going to go quite that dark. There we go. From there. Yeah, I like that right there. So let's okay that. I'm going to lower the opacity a little bit. I don't want it to be that strong. Let's add an inner shadow with a distance of 0. There we go. Pull back the opacity a little bit. Click OK. And here's what I want to show you. When I close this, it's going to say, do you want to save the changes? Notice it says PSB. That's because it's a smart object. So I click yes. And look at that. It updated both of them. So whenever we make a change to a smart object, if we have duplicates of that smart object, it gets changed there as well. Now let's go ahead and add an outer glow here. I'm going to go probably with, yeah, we can leave some yellow in there. Increase the size just a bit. And let's add a lens flare to that. Maybe right about there. Lower the brightness of that a little bit. And there we go. Let me show you also how you can take effects like this and apply those to other layers. So I've got my main title, then I've got my spine title. I want to take those same effects and put them on the spine. I'm going to press and hold Alt down, and this would be Option on the Mac, and I'm going to click and drag the effects onto that layer and drop them. Now I can do the lens flare as well, but watch how this works. Holding Alt down, I'm going to click and drag the lens flare, drop it over there. But notice that I can't see it. That's because it's positioned in a totally different place. But because this is a smart object, and we know that, from the little icon that shows up there, I can double click on that filter and reposition the effect. Okay, and there we go. Let's go ahead and hide these effects. And let's take the picture right here. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to actually convert that to a smart object as well, just so it's easier to move it around with the layer mask that it has. And I will put it, let's actually do Control T, and I'm going to shrink it down a little bit so that I've got some more room here. I'm going to bump it over to the right, I think. Let's grab our type tool, and I want some totally white text. So click the color swatch. We switch to white. We're going to go with something probably a little bit smaller. And let's change to just a standard old Arial black font. We'll type in some text here. Learn fast. Do another one. Play any song. And one more. I'm just putting these in arbitrary locations right now. Play any style. And we're actually going to shrink them down a good bit. So let's just pull those down about that big. So that's 9 points. And if you double click on a type layer, that automatically selects all the text there. So we'll just switch that to 9 points. And this one as well. 9 points. And now I will show you a little trick here. Let's space these wherever we want them. That looks pretty good right there. I'm going to click and then shift click so I have all three of them selected. I'll head up here and I'll align the left edge of those so now they're all lined up real nice. And I can actually do Control G because they're all selected. That'll put them in a group. Let's double click the group name and I'll type benefits. So now I can turn that group off and on, and I can move it around as a whole. It just gives me a little bit more flexibility there. And of course, we can open the group up and we still see all the elements inside of it. Okay, now that might be, that graphic might still be a little big. So let's do Control T, shrink it down. And I think I'm actually going to move it over to the left and move my text over to the right. Let's do Control T. Notice how I can resize this as a whole because I have them in a group like that. Okay, now what we need is, let's move this over just a little bit. Now what we need is either some bullet points or check marks or something like that there. So let me introduce you to the Custom Shape tool. This is a great tool to use inside of Photoshop because it not only gives you the standard shapes, but see how this right here has this custom shape, and then over here where it says shape, you have a drop down of tons of different shapes that you can use. And one of those in particular that we're going to use right now is the bullet point. So let's select that. We're going to make sure we're set to actually draw a shape. And let's just click and drag. And there we go. Grab the move tool. Look how quick and easy you get those nice looking graphics. If you want to change the coloring for this, double click right here. Let's do maybe a dark blue, or let's do a light color. Let's go with a light green. Great. We'll okay that. And I tell you what, let's add a drop shadow to that just to give it a little bit more depth. That looks great. We'll just go with the default settings. So then, you know, I don't like that green. So let's go ahead and grab one of the blue colors here, and we'll go with that. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. So let's go ahead and just do Control J to duplicate that layer. With my move tool, I'll move it down. We'll move it all the way down to here. And Control J again, and we'll move that copy up to right there. And we'll go ahead and grab the benefits. I'm just going to bump those over a little bit with the arrow key. There we go, looks pretty good. I think before we're done with this, we definitely need some drop shadow on, there we go, that looks pretty good. We're going to use the same technique, alt clicking on the shadow, and we're just going to drop it on each one of those text layers. There we go. That just gives it a little bit more depth. Drop shadow is a good thing to have on text most of the time. I think what we'll go ahead and add here is a domain name. Now this is going to be just a fake one, but www.learn, well, let's do capitals here, learnguitarfast.com. And I'm sure that there really is a URL out there that says that, but we're just using it as an example here. Let's do a drop shadow on that as well. I think we're going to use a little bit different settings just to make it look a little bit, yeah, not so defined around there. That looks pretty good. So I think we could do a little something over here with the spine. The cover is pretty good. We might want to throw something in the background. For example, let me see if I can't grab us a guitar. Well, lo and behold, wouldn't you know it, there is one right there. So let's just copy that to the clipboard, Control C, and we're going to do a little bit of blending again. Right behind, I want to put this right behind that graphic layer, right? So I'm going to select the layer before that and do Control V to paste, because whenever you paste something, it pastes in right above the currently selected layer. Control T to transform, and I think what we're going to do is we just want something kind of abstract here. I'm going to right click on this and flip horizontally because I actually want the image to look a little more like that right there. And we're going to do a total fade out on this, okay? So lower the opacity quite a bit, and we're definitely going to use a layer mask in this case. Let's add a mask, grab the gradient tool, and we'll just go with the old faithful black and white. Fade from right about here. Just kind of fade it in like that. Looks pretty good. We could even bring up, I think now we can bring the opacity up a little bit. And maybe try playing with one of the blending modes. Like maybe lighten, overlay. That looks pretty neat. Hard light and even luminosity. But I think in this case I'm going to go ahead and go with overlay. I think I like the way that looks. And right about there for opacity. Okay, I think our front cover is basically done. I might want to do a little something with the edge right here. At least put the URL. So here is our URL. Remember, we're going to convert this to a smart object just because at some point we might want to change that URL, because really what we can do right now is we're creating a template that we could use for other products. So I'll Control J that, Control T to transform it. Let's move it over here. Like so. Hit enter. And let's go ahead and run step 2. I know this video is getting kind of long, but I just want to show you. I want you to really be able to do all of this. And I want to show you how this can be used, how these actions can be used together. Okay, so we've got a really nice looking product here. Remember though, we wanted to be able to use a CD as well. So I'm going to save this on the desktop. We're going to call this Guitar Box. And let's go ahead and close it for now. But let's take this same thing and let's run the CD2 action. Step 1. And all it is a matter of deciding what we want to grab from this and popping it into the CD over here. So I think we want to grab play guitar. So let's take that, drag it over, kind of position it like so. Most of this stuff right here, I think we can go ahead and just trash it. Not going to use that. Let's see our gradient. We can get our whole coloring scheme. I'll just take the whole thing and drag it over. We're going to be repositioning it anyway. There we go. Simple as that. Let's grab In Just 17 Days. Move that into position. And we'll grab, well, we can do our banner too. Let's go ahead and do that. Kind of position that. We'll do a little tweak in here, Control T, to shrink that down just a bit. I might have to, you see this little black circle right here, that's telling me, you know, you want to stay away from there a little bit because that's gonna get popped out because of the hole in the CD. So we got to keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and take our bullet points here, and we'll right-click. And go ahead and convert that to a smart object. You can see these smart objects are pretty handy things. And let's find the text, and then we've got our benefits there. Let's go ahead, shift-click that. And we'll drag both of those over to the CD because I think we want to have both of those on here. And we just need some graphics. We can either grab this guitar or the one with the man. Let's go ahead and go for this one, I think. We'll do Control T. What I think I'm going to do with this is increase the size just to make it huge. Something like that right there. We got to get our benefits up on top and our check marks. Need to get those up there as well. Okay, and I think we're going to have to grab this in just 17 days part. Now let's go ahead and make a change to this because, you know, we can't really see the text, and that's very important. We'll double click on it. We're going to go with a white. That should stand out okay. Close that, commit the change, and yes, we want to save. And there we go. So now we can run CD step 2. And we've got a pretty nice looking CD. Let's go ahead and save this. And we'll call it Guitar CD. And bear in mind that with most of the actions, once the element is actually created, it's going to be created on a on a white background. But we can turn that background off. That gives us transparent pixels. And here's how we use this together. Let's go ahead and close that file, and we can close this. I recommend that whenever you do a layout like this, if this is something where you've put some time into it and you might use it later on, it's a good idea to save it. So let's go to Save As. We're going to call this Guitar Master and click Save. Then we'll go ahead and close it. And let's grab our guitar box. That we just created a minute ago. And remember, we've got the background that we can turn off. So we're going to take, and you have to take into account the size that you're dealing with. This is a pretty high resolution image here. So we're going to take that into account and take into account what you're going to use it for. So if we're putting these two things together and we're going to do like maybe just for the web, and it's going to be about 300 pixels wide, let's just go ahead, go to File and New, and create something. Let's do 325 pixels by 325 pixels. We only need to go with 72 for the resolution right now. Let's click OK. Now let me show you how this works. We're going to take this image. We're going to grab that box layer. And let's zoom out, do Control T to resize. When you zoom out this far, notice the bounding box there. That's because, again, this is very high resolution. So we're going to shift, click, and drag and get that into position. You can zoom in here. Okay, and then head back to our CD. Again, we're grabbing the transparent layer. Just click and drag it over to the other window. Zoom out. Control T. Shrink it down. We'll zoom back in. And you gotta watch your proportions here, okay? You want to make something that looks convincing. Maybe a little bit bigger. Depends on how big you want your box to look, I guess. But remember that people can tell, they know it's a CD, so they know about how big it should be. All right, so this is a small version. Let's go ahead and close all these other files. We don't really need them right now. And let's go to this back layer, fill that in with white, and we need to put, we need to put a reflection for our CD, and actually we don't want to cover up our bullet points there. We need to put a reflection for this CD. Let me show you how to do that. Control J to duplicate it. Control T to transform it. We're going to click and drag down, and that inverts it. hit enter. And then on that reflected layer, let's drag it down. Let's add a mask, gradient tool, going black to white. That covers it up nicely. Add, lower the reflection, lower the opacity so it kind of matches the reflection in that box. And then we're pretty much good to go. Maybe you want to make this into, a humongous course. No problem. Watch this. Control J. Now pay real good attention to what I do here. This is a pretty neat trick. Instead of just moving that over, I'm going to do Control T and then shift and move it over. Okay, and then I'm also going to rotate it just a little bit and hit enter. Now the reason that I did that like that is because of this. I'm going to do Control J to duplicate that layer, and then I'm going to do Control Shift T. Watch what it does. It duplicates that same transformation, so it moves it over a little bit and rotates it a little bit. Let's keep going. Control J, Control Shift T. Control J, Control Shift T. I can have as many of these things as I want. And of course, in this case, I think I want to line those up. The nice, that arc can be good if you were to lay them down, right in front of it, for example. Now, in this case, I'm going to scrap that reflection. I just want to show you how to do that. Let's go ahead and turn it off. But what I want to show you here is we'll shift-click all these CDs. Notice that nice curve that I got going there? I'm going to take all of those different layers, do Control E, and that merges them onto one layer. I'll do Control T, right-click, and I'm going to change to Distort. Then I can grab these handles in the corner. And I can make them look like they're laying down on the table. Let's go back to Free Transform and make them a little bit bigger. Maybe pull that in a little bit more. And there we go. And obviously, this is for the web, so I'm working with a pretty low res image, but you could go ahead and do this at a higher resolution, and then it would look better up close. But from, for web resolution, which I'm going to be using this for, let's go to zoom and actual pixels. That's how it's going to show up on the web page, so it doesn't have to be, real high resolution. And like I said before, I've created this box file, I've created the CD layout. I can save those as templates, basically. And I can go back in and I can swap the text out, I can change the color scheme. I can use a lot of different techniques to customize that without completely starting over from scratch. Okay, and we can take this and apply it to any of the actions. Let me go ahead, I'm not going to save this. I'll just close it. And Guitar Master, that's the original thing that we got going here. Let's go ahead and just I'll pick any one of these. Let's do the Notebook. Okay. Notebook 1. I'll play it. We'll go ahead and click and drag, and remember that trick. Copy merged. All right. Let's go ahead and close this. Control V to paste. And let's resize it. There we go. And play step 2. And there it is.